welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful back in the studio today, and I'm so excited my resin arrived, so I get to do this video that I have been kind of teasing for the last couple of videos. So if you're just joining me for the very first time, welcome. I do hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up and click on subscribe and then the little bell, and you'll receive a notification when I post a new video. So I've been working for several months now on a series I'm calling Gel Print Art. And if you have never gel printed, it's so much fun. It's very addictive. And a lot of people use those gel prints that they make for collage. But I figured there's got to be lots of other projects and things we can do with our gel prints, because when you do a gel print session, you end up making a lot of gel prints, and they're large pieces of paper. Those take a long time to use up if you're just doing collage with them. So I have this entire series that I'm doing on all sorts of things to make with your gel prints. Some of them were more kind of craft things, like things to hold your pens and art supplies and things in, all the way to now we're currently making a junk journal out of junk mail and envelopes. And so this was a couple of videos ago where I kind of put this together. And then I wanted to, I was gone for a bit, and I wanted to do something while I was away. And I made all of these fun little leaf embellishments with the tiny gel print scraps. So if you haven't been following along the series, there's lots and lots of videos. I think this is episode 23 that we're on today. So if you want to watch from the beginning of this series, it starts with EP1 in the playlist that I'm going to link down below in the description. And then there's also a running list of all the materials and tools and things that I've used in this entire series. So whatever video you're watching, if you scroll down to the end of the list, it'll be the things that are pertaining to that video. And then in the description, in some of them, I also link other videos that may be of interest that are along the same topic and that kind of thing. So today, though, we're going to be making these fun leaves. And the other day, I had worked on this journal, and I went ahead and did a little tassel. And in previous videos, we made some beads, and so I've used some of those in this as well. So I'll show you kind of how I put this together at the end, because I have a couple little tips and tricks about this. So you're going to need a few things. We're going to work with UV resin, and I was out, and so I needed to get some more. So I use this brand called Picasso. There's a link down in the description for this one, but this is UV resin, so it will cure in sunlight, even in not so sunny, cloudy light, any kind of UV light. And then you can also use what I am using, which is a UV cure light. And I've had a couple of different ones over time, but I found that I really like this particular one. So I have a link for this one. It comes, you can take it apart. So you would actually then have two lights. It only comes with one adapter, so you would need a second adapter, but it's just a regular C port, I think. So then you could have actually two going at once. So I've been doing them kind of just with it stacked like this, because it makes a nice little place to work with. And it only comes with one of these little trays. But if you're using just half, you just do it on your tabletop. So I have this kind of in front of me. Now, when I made these leaves, I was in Utah and I didn't have one of those lamps there, but I had some resin. So it was a sunny day, and I did them for 2 days, and I just did them outside in the sun. It wasn't windy, so I wasn't worried about getting dust on them or anything. So you don't have to have that light if you have a place that you can, even inside in your studio, maybe you have a sunny windowsill area that you can set something, that would work great. And it doesn't take very long. When you buy the bottle of resin, it actually has instructions, and it will tell you how long to cure, depending on if you're using a light and what the wattage is for that, and then versus, out in the sun or on a cloudy day, that kind of thing. So you're going to need something, some kind of UV, and then a resin. It doesn't have to be that brand, but that's just what I use, and it seems to be working great. And then they recommend you wear gloves, which I'm not going to do. I'm pretty careful and don't get it on my hands. And then they also recommend you work in a well-ventilated area. because remember, if you can smell it, you're inhaling it. So I sometimes use this extractor, and it has filters in it. And so instead of a fan that's just blowing all this toxic stuff around you, it's taking it away from you through this filter, so it's kind of vacuuming it up instead of blowing it around. It makes noise, so I'm not going to use this. I do just have my windows open, so we're going to do that today. So you need, your resin, your extractor. You can use the when you buy the resin, it comes with some little silicone tools that you can use, and also a little cup. So we may use that. It's handy. It's handy to have a baby wipe to clean your fingers. When I was working with the other type of resin, the 2-part resin that just has to dry overnight, takes a long time, but you don't need UV for that one. But that one, I would use alcohol, just regular rubbing alcohol, and that would clean it. This does not work the same way with this UV resin. Actually, just to clean your fingers and things, a baby wipe works better just because of what it's made out of. It's just a whole different thing than the 2-part epoxy. So I'm just going to maybe have a little cups here to put some resin in. And then we're going to also be pouring right from the bottle. You can pour from these things too. And then you're also going to need some sort of sealer because we're working with paper. And I don't think I mentioned this when I did the button demos. So it works the same with the button demos. You need to, anything that's porous, you need to seal it first before you put the resin on, or you'll get some bubbles. So I'm just using matte gel because all of the papers I'm going to be using today were done on Japanese rice paper, and so it's a thinner paper. You can use any brand, it doesn't matter, but this is the thicker consistency. This, like matte medium, this is thinner. And to me, those thinner ones make the paper wrinkle more. And so we really kind of want it to try not to get wrinkles in it because we're putting 2 layers together, because then air is trapped in there and you might get bubbles, that kind of thing. So I'm using this. Then I need a brush to apply that. Let me grab my brush, which I wash. And this is the brush that I like to use for collaging. It's a Catalyst. It's by Princeton, a Catalyst number 8 filbert brush. And the reason I like this one is it's very stiff. So when you're collaging or anything, your brush bristles aren't collapsing. You really can push on that and it works really well. So this is my favorite brush for that. There's also a link obviously down for this brush. And then, so I'm going to use that. And then what else do I need? I need my wire and things. This will be for the paper we're going to use. Now I just grabbed, if you watched yesterday's video, I showed you how I store my gel prints based on the way that I work with them. So I grabbed my little bin that had all my small pieces of my stripy papers. So if you've been watching my videos, you will understand what these are and how we got to this point. So you really kind of want to watch from the beginning if you haven't been doing that. Now, you don't have to use something this detailed, these stripy papers, but to me, that's how you make all these interesting leaves. You could just use a regular gel print, just something that's maybe anything that's maybe has a pattern on it is nice. But today I'm going to use this little scraps from the thin stripy papers. So if you've been watching, you know what I mean. I have thick stripy papers and I have thin stripy papers. I use the thin ones for these. I have not tried it with the thick ones, and I think the thick ones might be too thick because I'm actually just capturing it with some wire. And so this is not as thick as like a bezel would be. So I would be concerned that if I used to 2 layers of those thicker papers that it would be too thick. So that's why I'm using those. Now, as far as the wire, when we get to that point, I used, I believe, 20 gauge wire for these. I may have started out, it looks like 20 gauge wire. I used 20 gauge copper wire. So these were done in copper. I might do bronze today just for fun. And part of it's going to be the beads that if you want to add beads like I did, you want a small enough gauge that will fit through the whole of your beads. So I think either one of these would work, but bigger wire, I think would be, unless you have big beads, would be, harder to work with. Plus it's harder to, wrap and all that kind of thing. And you also don't want to be too small because, like I said, we're using this as a bezel. So you want it to be thick enough to be the edge of your paper. So 20 or 22 gauge. And these are, you know, I buy these in bulk for, they're solid. They're not like a plated wire. You can use, this is stainless steel wire that I use for making my little shanks for my buttons. This one is also 20 gauge. But you can even just use, for what we're doing, you can even just use cheap plated wire, you know, things that you buy at the craft store. So any kind, just that, you know, a gauge that's going to fit along the edge of your paper. So the first thing that I need to do is take my scraps. What I want to do is I want to have my leaves be two-sided. So you can either take two different pieces of paper and put them together. These were leftover bits from when I made the cradles. So if you haven't been watching, in some of the first videos, we made these little art cradles, and I mitered the corners of the stripy paper. So I had a bunch of these left because I made, I think, 4 or 5 of these panels. Anyway, that's what these two pieces are. So you can have two completely different ones, you know, so for double-sided, but you can also take, maybe this was the same, this was one longer strip, a larger piece, and I just folded it in half. It would be like taking this and folding it in half. And, you know, then you still get two different sides. If you want a longer, you know, a longer leaf, then you could fold it that way and have the, you know, two different sides. So you kind of look at your little scraps. And so I try to maybe match them up, ones that are similar size. This one, I can just maybe fold like this. And then I could maybe go like this and not waste that. So maybe I'll cut this off straight. So let's do this one. So I'm going to take I work in a really dry climate. I'm in high desert. So I take some of this out so that I don't dry out or contaminate my entire container. So I'm going to take this one, and maybe I protect my table here. And I'm going to fold that over. And then I'm going to actually cut this. Hopefully I'm cutting kind of straight. And that way, if I want, I can glue this here, and it makes my paper a little bit bigger if I needed to make that leaf a little bit bigger, since I don't really know what I'm doing yet. So I want to make sure that I have like little loose pieces here. I want everything to be glued down. So I'm just going to put some glue here. And just not to waste anything, because you're kind of, other than seeing the pattern be different, you'll never really know that that was not one piece of thing. So if you can see that, I just added that little piece. So I'll have to, you know, I'm going to cut a leaf out of this, so it's, I'm going to end up with some waste around the edges anyway. So then you want to, if you have something like this, I use this just for glue. It's a speedball brayer. That helps me just get all those bubbles out. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is, I've mentioned this in previous videos, but I have to try to remember that not everybody's watched these. So these papers, these stripy papers, have a lot of pen work on them that were done with either acrylic paint markers or gel pens, different, you know, jelly roll pens, metallics, all that kind of thing. You need to seal your paper first so that your pen work doesn't smear. And I use Krylon, it's from Krylon, and I use Kamar, K-A-M-A-R, Kamar varnish. You can use a workable fixative, something like that. It's a spray. It does give a little sheen. Some of these I have done and some I have not. So you want to do that if you have pen work where the pens might not be stable. We're going to add this liquid, you know, wet something. And so it could just brush it right off. I'm not going to be too worried about these because I'm just making these leaves, but you want to seal them first. If you don't, at least brush like sideways instead of this way, so that you'll see on some of the other stripe ones, so that I don't smear maybe from one color up here through my, you know, my little white parts. So you want to keep that in mind. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm also going to put this on the other side. So I'm going to set this one aside because I have some already finished. Now, if you want to make earrings or something like that, then it's nice to have a bigger piece, you know, that was this, maybe I would go this way so that I can make two that are going to be really pretty much the same. So if you want to make earrings, you might want to make them and not care if they match each other either, because they're just so colorful and fun that, you know, it would be the same style and design, but like wearing two different color socks. So I'm just going to do that. And I did not roll that one with my sprayer. So if this wasn't sealed, I'd want to go sideways like this so that I don't get, you know, a color down in my black and white part that I don't want. So we'll set that one aside. I don't put too much thought about which way the design's going or anything like that for these leaves, because they're just, you know, little dangly embellishments. And so I don't, it's not like it's that critical. I just want them to be really fun and colorful. And then this one, even like these long strips, I can just fold that one in half, and that would be a nice long skinny leaf. So I've got quite a few going here. I'm not going to make all of these on camera, but I like to sort of mass make things, especially when I'm using up scraps, because then I've used up maybe, you know, all the scraps that size, which will free up a bin or something like that. And then it gives me a stash, you know, for future projects. I don't have to make them all the time. So I'm trying to get anything that's not stuck down. Because if you've followed this and watched me make these, you're just, this rice paper, you're just gluing one strip to the next, you know, kind of to itself. And as you're working with these, you know, doing your pen work and all of that, you know, they may loosen up and not be stuck down as well, because I originally maybe did it with just a glue stick. So you're going to do all of those. I think these are all finished. So I need to go put my brush in some water. I'll do the other sides of those later. So you're going to do both sides and let them dry. Okay, once they are dry, like all of these, now I can just start making my leaves. Now I've tried doing this two different ways. So I have a favorite, and I'll tell you the other way so you can, you know, decide on your own which one you'd like to do. I don't think it makes a difference. I did them both to see which was easier for me. So I'm going to I need some scissors. I want my little ones, maybe, if I can find them here next to me. So you need some scissors, and I'm just gonna freehand cut some leaves. Now you can do the wire first, form it into the leaf shape, your little frame, and then cut the leaf. But I found it easier for me to cut the leaf and then wrap the wire around it. So you can do it either way. So you're gonna just, you know, make some random leaf shape, and it could be any size. You know, you're just going to do whatever you can be a long skinny one or a fat one, and it doesn't have to be the same on both sides. So just cut your random leaf shapes. This would be a pretty tiny one, but I think I can get another one out of this. And this one, let's see. I haven't done any really big ones. I kind of like them to go this direction rather than this direction, but you can do it either way. And the other thing is, as you're doing these, if you were making jewelry, for example, you may be a little more particular about how clean your mark making is. You might want it to be a little, not perfect, but a little nicer. You can go back over, you know, or add, maybe you want more mark making on there. Once you see something smaller, you might see empty space you don't like. So you can always add, you know, do more or whatever. But I am tempted just to make a pretty big leaf here. Now we're going to be cutting these a little more to make them fit our frames. So you don't have to be too worried about it. Okay, so I won't do all of these now, but you're going to cut leaves out of all of these. Okay, so I have a few to work with, different sizes. Okay, so that's what we start with. And then you're going to take your wire, and I think I'll do some with the bronze wire. And I don't remember which gauge I use, but I'm going to use the 20 gauge. I just like how sturdy it is. Okay, and I didn't really like measure or anything when I did this. I didn't measure. You're going to need a couple of other things, obviously. You're going to need some jewelry tools, so just to be able to cut some wire cutters. And I would just kind of look at my leaf and realize I want some that I leave sticking up because I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them maybe. So I want to leave a bit for beads, however many beads I might want to add. And then I go around my leaf and I have to wrap that also. So I'm going to kind of just eyeball this, and maybe I go ahead. I'm going to use just some little needle nose, and I'm going to make a little bend for the bottom of my leaf. And then I need some to wrap around. So I tended to kind of make a piece, cut it, and then I have this part that's longer. Now I have a kink in that because I had it closed off, so I'm going to kind of flatten that out. Okay, so I just kind of do that so that one side is longer than the other side. Again, I'm not measuring anything. I'm just kind of eyeballing from the shape of my leaf. I'm just going to lay this down and just kind of manipulate these so that they have just a soft bend and I don't get any big kink in there, and do the other side. Just kind of, make it want to crisscross. Now, I want it can be a little smaller than my leaf. I don't want it bigger than that leaf because I can trim this down to fit. So I kind of just hold it there, and I'm going to take, these are my little flat nose pliers, and I'm going to take and this long one, and I'm going to make a bend so that it's kind of going straight up and down. And then this one is the one I'm going to end up wrapping. So I kind of start it like that, just so I can then take it off of my leaf. So I have my wrap started, and then I'm just going to wrap this around. Now, the smaller gauge wire is easier to wrap than this because it's not, and this is bronze. So bronze wire, this is dead soft, I think, but bronze wire is harder than copper wire. Copper wire is softer. So if you're not familiar with jewelry making and all of that, then you might want to use copper. It's cheap. It's the cheapest, and it's easier to work with. So I might switch in my next ones to do copper because I like them. I like the way they patina anyway. So you're just going to do a few wraps. You don't have to do that many, 2 or 3 wraps. And I know my leaf is kind of wonky, and that's okay because they're just, kind of freehand things. And I'm going to end up having to shape it a little bit, more. They get easier once you've made a few. And I haven't made these in a few days, so I'm just going to snip that off and then kind of squeeze that. So I have roughly my shape. So I kind of try to flatten that out a little bit. Okay, so you want to kind of try to make it flat. If it's not perfectly flat, it's going to be fine. They're supposed to look kind of natural and organic. So then I'm going to take my leaf. I'm just going to kind of find where it might want to sort of fit. When I made it, I actually kind of moved things around a little bit. So you can see I need to trim some here. I need to trim some here. But it's easier to me to get your frame, have your leaf, you kind of had a size you were going for, than to start like right now with a piece of paper and have to start from scratch. Now I could do it. I could draw around this with a pen, but then I have to trim that whole thing and get it just right. It works either way. So you try, maybe try both ways. Maybe you think the other way is easier. I kind of got faster at doing it this way. So I can see where I need to maybe kind of do some trimming. And for the trimming, you can use, these are just kind of like little fussy cutting scissors. But again, for rounded edges, it's kind of nice to use cuticle scissors. And then you can kind of get those edges. And you can flip them around and go the other direction when you need to make the curve go kind of the other way. So whatever scissors you have. And then I can kind of tell when I did that, I really made it want to fit right in there. It's not the end of the world if you get little gaps, but you want to kind of get it as tight fitting as you can. So because it's paper, you can even kind of squeeze and manipulate it a little bit. So I'm, from the other side, I can kind of see where I need to be. I can kind of feel that wire. So I can kind of just cut right along the wire. And again, it's not perfect. And if I start kind of squeezing it in there, it will stay. So it's not perfect. You know, I can see I have a little gap up there and a little gap over here. But at the end of the day, when you've got this all made and resined, you don't really see those gaps. So I'm just kind of fussing it in there. And my tip is kind of a little bit rounded because it's really hard to get a tight fit in the tip. So I kind of just take the littlest amount off. And you just fuss with it until you get it to where it will kind of hold itself in that wire. But that's pretty good. So I kind of just take my time because I really kind of want it to be in the middle of that. And I don't really want to see that white edge of my paper. So just super gently. Okay, I don't have this all the way in perfectly, but I'm going to show you because everyone's going to be different. Some are easier than others. So if you get one side in that's in pretty good and the other side just keeps wanting to pop out too much, we're going to go ahead and fix one side in because we're going to do this in layers anyway. Fix one little part in and then you can, kind of manipulate the other side easier. So, okay, that is in there pretty good. So I might pick just even one side that looks pretty good and I'm going to put a little bit of resin on that. If you feel like you have the whole thing in there pretty well, you can just resin the one whole side and kind of get it started. So you just want to be very careful. I mean, it's not in there perfectly and there might be little gaps, but we're going to put enough resin and it's going to cure pretty fast. So we're going to just put enough on there and get it into the light, and then we can add more layers later. So you can just pour directly from your bottle. You don't want to squeeze. You don't want to make bubbles. So you're just I'm gonna drop some on here, and there is a gap, so it would go through it, but I'm not too worried. I'm just gonna go right up to that wire just to get some on there. And I just have a little bit on the edge right now because I just really want to get this stuck to the wire so that I can continue working with it. So I'm going to put it under my light for a second here. And then I would maybe just sit that on. Even though it comes on its own little plastic tray, I use these craft sheets so that I can, kind of rotate things out. So I would just maybe sit that on there and let that go ahead and cure while I work on another one. So maybe grab another one. And maybe this one, I'm going to use the copper wire because the copper wire this may not have been my best thing to do. I actually have some spools. I'm going to put these on. I'm going to take it off of here. I saved some ribbon spools, and I think I'm going to put that on there is better. So I'm going to take the copper one. Yeah, I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to use the 20 gauge copper wire, and I'm just going to go ahead again, same thing. Now, I have this little set that I bought for here, and it comes with really all the basic tools you need. I don't know if I have this down in the description or not, but I did order it online, so I think I'll find that and put that down there too. These are soft. They're not soft. They're like plastic though, so you don't mar your wire. They work really well for flattening out your wire when it's bent. Or I could just cut that little end off. I may end up anyway. So I'm going to go ahead again, same kind of thing. I'm going to make a little thing here while that other one cures and just kind of see how much wire I need. And you can kind of look at your paper and see maybe part that looks like a top or a bottom, the shape. This is one of those times when you're not trying to be too perfect is a good thing. This is much easier to work with the copper. Okay, so I would do the same thing and get that one fitted. So this one's probably cured enough. It is. So I have one side stuck and it makes it easier then for me to move around this other side and get it exactly where I want it. So much easier. And I can see that there's a little bit of a gap, but once you have this layered and layered and layered with your resin, you're not gonna see if they're not perfect. And like I said, the more you do them, the better you get at it. So I'm just going to do the same thing and finish putting resin on this whole thing. And you can let this get on the wire. I mean, again, we're making these leaves. You can file it off with the emery board after if you wanted to. And I see I have a little bubble on that one. So once you have to put that much resin down, you're going to maybe see get bubbles. So you can just take a lighter, just this little, and just run it across, and it'll pop those bubbles. If you see the bubbles, you can just use, even like I use this bead reamer that for my resin stuff, just to hold things. And then sometimes you can pop them, you know, if you get a piece of lint or something on there. So I can see where I don't have my resin really nice and pretty. So I will probably be doing another layer anyway. But if I want it to be all, you know, I try to get it as nice and even and everywhere. So if you don't want to pour straight from your bottle, you can put some in that little cup. You can use a little throwaway paintbrush and move it around, or you can use that silicone spreader thing. They come with 2 tools, and so they have 2 ends, so you end up with really like 4 tools. And so you can just kind of move that and get that nicely to the edge, especially on, like if you're going to do multiple layers, you know, by your last layer, you want to have it look even. And so I'll probably do another layer on this side too anyway. I'm probably fussing with this much more than I need to. Okay, and then I'll put that under the light again. So you're just going to do that on both sides, and you just keep repeating it until you get the leaf, the resin, as nice and thick and perfect as you want it to be. And I like them to be thick enough, you know. You could maybe do 1 or 2 layers and be fine, but I like them to have, you know, a little bit of a dome on them. So you just do batches of these, maybe 2 or 3 coats on each side. If you end up with some, you know, that where you don't want it, if you have jewelry files or an emery board, something you can, or fine sandpaper, you can clean that off. But you know, it's really easy to just get to that edge and not, you know, not get it everywhere. And then just stack some beads on it. And then just for keeping these manageable, I've gone ahead and used my round nose pliers and made a little loop there, just because I don't know, you know, I didn't know if this was going to be something I wanted to add a jump ring to something or put this directly onto a piece of chain, something like that. So for my dangles that I did, I went ahead and finished this off. So you just kind of make your loop and then you go back the opposite direction. So you make kind of a little 45-degree there. And then I use this to hold it in the other hand. And then take your flat nose pliers and go right up to that and just bend it around a couple of times. So I made this one much longer than it needed to be. So I can save this and, you know, use it for something else. I actually have a little nest I'll show you. I think it's here. I have from my jewelry making, you know, me not wanting to throw away any scraps. I actually save all my little wire bits. So now I have the little loop there that's wrapped. And now I can attach that to all kinds of things. So I'll show you what I do with my scrap wire. I've made this little bird nest out of it. And I actually just recently put this in there. I was trimming off some cardstock, really fine edges. When I was making my little cards, I wanted to make sure that it was very squared up. So I would end up with these little tiny fine ones, which I think I might color these with some inks and stuff. But anyway, it's going to grow a nest. Okay, so this one is probably cured enough now. So you can see even just that amount that I did is pretty, you know, pretty good. And then I would flip it over and do the other side, and then you have your leaf. So do a whole bunch of those. And then to do my tassel, I have just a little tip about this. If you watched this video, I used some waxed beading thread to bind my journal. It was this one. I used the turquoise one. It's just waxed Brazilian cord from the Beadsmith. And I'll put that down. I don't think I've had it in the description yet, but I need to add that. But you can see, to do that, I used this big needle to do my binding, but that is much larger than any of my beads, and I don't have any of my beading needles here. So what I did was, this is pretty thick. I don't need it to be that thick, for one. And I wanted my tassels, I wanted multiple strands, but I didn't really want to add anything to this. So if you remember, I left these really, the two that I tied together, I left them really long. And so I was able to actually take those two threads and take them apart, untwist them. I untwisted those two. It made me have 4 that were this thick, and you can see they're kind of curly cued. And I've done this in previous things with glue, like crazy glue. You want the thin kind of crazy glue that dries instantly. I have some like Gorilla Glue that's the clear one, this kind of super glue. This one isn't the real thin one, so it takes a few minutes to dry still, but you could use this, any of those clear ones. But we have our resin, so resin will work too. I want to turn this into its own needle. So you could take your resin and just put a little on the end of these and then let that cure under your light. Okay, so once you've let that dry, whether you've used your glue or resin, you've made that end stiff. And so now it's kind of like having its own needle. And so it makes it just much easier to thread your beads on. So I've just used a variety of, plastic. This is just a cheap plastic bead that you buy those beads in bulk. And then just some little glass ones, just some little crystal beads, that kind of thing. Some of the paper ones and some of the fabric ones. These were done with our gel print fabrics and some with gel print paper, and just make some fun little tassels. So I have so many strands because I had the 4 strands that I made with the 2 strands of thread, but then one of them was so long I was able to put my strand on, and then I actually just went back up through the beads that I had, and it came out the top, and then I had enough for another little one. So you just kind of use what you have. But I just love how colorful and fun and patterned those are with our gel print. So I hope this gave you some ideas and that you're inspired to make some leaves. They'd be great for jewelry even, like I said, earrings or necklaces or whatever. They're pretty lightweight, so that's kind of nice for earrings. Anyway, so that's it for me today, and I'm not sure what my next project will be, but I've been working I actually found another journal that usually when I find a journal that I was working on, if you watched yesterday's video, I was showing all of my organizational stuff for my gel prints, and I found this while I was cleaning up in one of the bins. And I don't even remember really making this. I didn't do it here. I haven't bound it in yet. I just have a rubber band around it. So I don't think I did this in a video at all. And it's really with the junk stuff. So I think I almost think maybe I took a few things when we first went to Utah, and that I may have started doing it there, because this is just some tea-stained envelopes and things that I had made, and some junk mail. But I had started, this is I remember this came in like a shoe box. But I've started this journal, and these were all papers that I had these with them, and these were all papers way back when I first started doing this. It was all done on junk mail, but I was painting. I don't know, some of them may be gel prints, but I may have just even been painting before I knew about gel printing. I may have just been painting and stenciling on these papers. So I had this one that I started, so I might need to pull out some gel prints and things and actually finish this one too. So you never know what you're going to find when you're cleaning up. But that is it for me for the rest of the day. I'm going to continue working on this one, I think, and try to come up with my next new project to do with gel printing. So that's it. Have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.